Okay, everybody get their mics on?
Yes.
Welcome, everybody. This is the September 17 meeting of the Freeport Project Review Board. We have two agenda items we'll get to in a second. The first is seeking final approval, site plan approval, Maine Beer Company for 56 parking spots at 2 Stagecoach Road, and then a concept presentation for New Hampshire Solar Gardens at 15 Prout Road for a solar farm. And before we get into that or review of the minutes, Kyle, give us an information update, please. I also want to note we have a quorum. 2 are missing, Dan Lynch and Lynn Hamlin, but 5 of us constitute a quorum.
Yeah, so info exchange, number 1, update on the comp plan. So good news, the council last night adopted the 2025 comprehensive plan update. So it's a big milestone for the planning board and the council and everyone who participated. So thanks to all the board members who came out over the kind of previous year and a half to help work on that. So yeah, now we'll have lots of new fun policy items to work on at planning board that we'll make sure to keep you posted on. Other topics reviewed by the planning board this past month. So Maine Golf, if you recall, they recently came for the driving range project, and in that application they mentioned a phase 2 potentially with the clubhouse and redoing their parking area. So they actually went to the planning board for a zone text amendment application to reduce the minimum parking requirement for golf courses and golf driving ranges, because our parking requirement for those uses are abnormally high for what that use is, requiring something like 8 parking spaces for every golf course hole. It would have required a kind of somewhere in the range of like 178 parking spaces for their future project in our rural zone. So not exactly the type of use the planning board has been advocating throughout the comp plan process. And so they went forward with that zoning text amendment application. The board had supported it as consistent with the comprehensive plan, recommended it to the town council. The town council set the public hearing last night, so they'll vote on that in a couple weeks. So we'll give you an update, but whenever that project does come back, we'll be operating under that new standard, most likely. Other than that, the planning board at its last meeting started a discussion on potential zoning changes in the C1 and C3 districts, so kind of south of downtown, heading south to the town line along Route 1. So starting to look at potential upzoning efforts around building height and density requirements in that corridor, and sort of just general cleanup of the ordinance language, especially in the C1 district, which if you look at our zoning ordinance now is a bit all over the place and difficult to navigate for applicants and staff. So as those conversations kind of go on, we'll have more updates for the board then. And staff approvals, we have not had any the past month, so no updates there.
Thanks, Kyle. Next agenda item is review of the August 20 minutes. And I don't think we can bring them to a vote because 2 people are missing, and we had 2 people who missed the last meeting. You and Drew were
I listened to the minutes when we got home from our trip. I mean, I listened to the meeting, so I thought that was okay to vote.
Yeah, I guess for the minutes too, it's fine if both people are participating.
I mean, I won't.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I didn't realize you had. So is there a motion to accept the minutes from the August 20 meeting as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion or suggested changes? All in favor? Okay, thanks, Sharon. The first matter of business is NBC Holdings, Maine Beer Company, seeking final approval for 56 additional parking spots.
Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, please do.
All right, so before we turn it over to the applicant, just a few updates from the last time the board saw this application come in for conceptual review. So if you recall, at the last meeting, one of the items we talked about was the the idea that there are sort of two options. Currently, Main Beer and the abutting parcel where the proposed parking area are two different lots. Either the parking area would have to meet the landscape setback on the side setback area for the C1 district, or the lots could be merged. The applicant has indicated that they're willing to merge the lots, which makes it a lot simpler and cleaner. So you will notice in the proposed motion, there's a condition of approval. If and when we do get to that point, I do have a slight change in the language of that condition of approval. Just instead of prior to issuance of the building permit, we would want to make it prior to the release of the performance guarantee. The applicant can go into more detail on where they are with the lot merger, but most likely they would be looking to start construction prior to the lot officially being merged as they work out some final details. So to not hold up construction potentially, we would just look to make sure we get in that the lots have been merged and recorded at the registry, but not tie up the project based on that. So that would allow the building permit to be issued, but we can require that conditions still be enforced later down the line. Otherwise, we've received our memo from our peer review engineer on the stormwater proposal. There were a few comments in there. Most of them were notes, just clarifications to be put onto the plan set. I think there were 5 comments in the memo. We do have delegated review authority for stormwater, as this just requires a stormwater permit through DEP typically. So our peer review engineer reviewed the stormwater management plan under DEP guidelines and provided that checklist in there. So there were no real concerns talking with our engineer. They recommended that the few remaining comments could be handled through a condition of approval, just with follow-up clarification of those few details. Also, one of the comments we received last time from our code enforcement office was, if the lots were going to be kept separate, as a new parking area, would have been kind of its own dedicated use. It would have required the addition of some ADA spaces. Because the lots are being merged, the parking lot would become part of the existing parking area and existing Main Beer site. Therefore, they can take advantage of those existing ADA spaces already present closer to the building. So that sort of resolves that issue also by doing the merger. And we talked about last time, there's some additional landscaping going in on the southern property line to provide a little extra buffer to that the use to the south. And then you have the stormwater management feature to the east of the parking area. Lighting, as proposed, meets our exterior lighting standards, so no concerns there. No new access off of Route 1, so no concerns there regarding the ordinance, and no new permits from Public Works for street opening or anything like that. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Chris for more details, but happy to answer any questions if the board has any.
Chris, before you start, I have one question for you, Kyle.
Yep.
So you mentioned the merger,
Yes.
the sequencing of the merger, and the motion as proposed, the approval motion, if we get that far, as proposed, suggested it's before a building permit's issued. We'd change the wording to be...
Yeah, so I would recommend 3F, just taking out that language under 3F and moving that to a number 5 and saying prior to the release of the performance guarantee, and then you could read what currently is 3F, that the applicant provide evidence to the town that the two lots have been merged and that new lot's recorded at the registry. So it's just kind of changing the order there of when providing that record of lot merger would be required.
Thanks.
Normally, we would word that prior to issuance of an occupancy permit, but because this only involves a parking lot and there's no building, there's technically no occupancy. So that's why we're sort of using the performance guarantee as the mechanism to hold the applicant accountable.
All set? Go ahead, Chris, thanks.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Chris Taylor. I'm a professional engineer with Sebago Technics, representing the applicant tonight. I think Kyle did a great job reviewing some of the updates that we've done and the layout of the parking lot. So I won't really go through all that again. I'll just note that we have made some additional updates. We've applied for a permit by rule just for a stormwater outfall from the stormwater basin is within. Is that better? Right here.
Yep.
Feel very official now. Yeah, so we have applied for a permit by rule with the DP just for the stormwater outfall within 75 feet of the stream that's on site. We have done 2 test pits that are located within that under-drain soil filter that's proposed. That was one of the comments from the peer review consultant, so we've already taken that and kind of performed those test pits that are required and started the process to revise the plans and respond to the comments that they have that are outstanding.
Chris, can I jump in real quick just to follow up on that specific point? When I talked with our peer review engineer about that, they weren't really concerned about the test pits, but noted that I think something about that the test pits are required to determine if a liner would be necessary with the stormwater management feature, but the applicant was already proposing a liner. So it was kind of a technicality that the test pit had to be done, but there was no real concern that, of what the result would be, as the applicant was already taking the more stringent kind of approach to it.
Yeah, that's correct. And we had, the test pit is needed to identify where rock is and where groundwater elevations are. We did not encounter rock, and groundwater was shallow, but we expected that, and because of that, we were already proposing a liner so that the groundwater doesn't come into the basin. So we had accounted for that factor already, being, given the situation of the site and the topography, we expected that groundwater to be pretty high. So we had accounted for that, and that doesn't really change any of the design, but we did do the test pits to kind of fulfill that submission requirement. I guess taking a step back, just the whole purpose of this parking expansion is, Maine Beer's got a lot of customers that come in to the tasting room during the summertime months. They're needing this expansion to fulfill some of the summertime peak demand, as well as looking forward to the future of potential expansion, and kind of getting set up for being able to expand further in the future. And in terms of schedule, the request for the condition of approval to be pushed in later to hold that kind of performance guarantee and not upon the building permit is that they're trying to utilize this winter season, the slow season, to be able to construct the parking expansion, get it ready and lined up, constructed, finished in the springtime once the paving plants reopen, so that they can utilize this parking lot for that summertime peak demand. But they just want to get started this fall and are trying to work out how to merge these lots and kind of the mortgages on them. So.
Any questions for Chris? You answered my only question with, and that was regarding the soil test. I'll note that there were no public concerns raised when this appeared before the council, and none at the first meeting we had on this topic, but are there any members of the public who'd like to be heard? There being none, is there anyone care to make a motion?
I'll read it. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the printed findings of facts and site plan review for the development of a 57-space parking lot by MBC RE Holdings, LLC, at 2 Stagecoach Road and 525 US Route 1, Tax Map 23, lots 44B and 61A, to be built substantially as proposed, with the application dated August 26, 2025, finding that it meets the standards of the Freeport zoning ordinance with the following conditions of approval. This approval incorporates by reference all supporting plans that amend the previously approved plans submitted by the applicant and the representatives at Project Review Board meetings and hearings on the subject application to the extent that they are not in conflict with other stated conditions. Number 2, prior to construction, the applicant obtain any applicable permits from Freeport Codes Enforcement Department. Item 3, prior to the issuance of any building permits, the applicant does the following: establish an inspection account in an amount to be determined for the inspection of site improvements by the town. B, establish a performance guarantee in the amount to cover all costs of the site work associated with the project in an amount to be determined in a form acceptable to the town attorney. The performance guarantee shall cover the cost of all site work. Along with the performance guarantee, a non-refundable administrative fee at the rate established by the Freeport Town Council be paid. C, the developer have a pre-construction meeting with the town planner. D, enter into a maintenance agreement for a stormwater management system with the town of Freeport to be recorded in the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds, with yearly stormwater reporting to the town of Freeport being required. E, address the remaining comments regarding stormwater management stated by the town's peer review engineer in their memo dated September 10, 2025. Item 4, the approval of a site plan shall become void if construction of site improvement is not initiated within 2 years of the date of such approval unless such time limit is extended by the board that granted the original approval. Item 5, prior to release of the performance guarantee, provide evidence to the town that the 2 lots, 525 US Route 1 and 2 Stagecoach Road, have been merged and the lot is recorded in the Registry of Deeds.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion as presented? Thanks. Thank you, Sharon. Thanks for all you folks do, Steve. You're good citizens in town.
Just real quick for the board, I did add in that condition number 4 about the expiration approval. That's our standard expiration. Code enforcement had asked that we start including that as a condition of approval just across the board as a standard condition, just so applicants are aware of that and they don't have to dig through the ordinance to find it. So nothing new or special about this one. It's just that we're trying to make it more upfront.
Second agenda item is 15 Prout Road, proposal for a solar farm, which will require site plan review, and this is the conceptual presentation requiring no specific action by us. Kyle, give us a summary.
Yeah, so I'll pull up the conceptual plan here that was included in the application. So Prout Road in this part of town, off Route 1 is in our medium density B district. Sort of a lower density area, but allows a mixture of uses. Sort of a transition area from the more downtown area out to the more rural areas. In this area, large scale and small scale solar farms are an allowed use. So large scale solar farms would have a developed solar area somewhere between 2 and 10 acres. So that's what this project would fall under. Our zoning ordinance, I mean, the lot meets all of the, minimum lot requirements for an MDB district. It's a, fairly large lot at over 40 acres. So There's no concerns about any, lot size or space and bulk standards with the lot. As for the use itself, again, it's allowed. We do have a fairly robust dedicated section in our zoning ordinance for performance standards for solar projects. So I did not include every single one of those requirements in the staff report, just, because it would have been fairly redundant with just kind of copying and pasting what was already in the zoning ordinance. But in the final application submission, the applicant should kind of provide a detailed response to each one of those. But, generally, it requires reaching out to, several state agencies, Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, Maine Historic Preservation Commission, just to, verify that, natural and some other sensitive resources aren't being impacted. The applicant's already done, as part of this plan, some wetlands and vernal pools, research that I'll let them dive more into.
Thank you, sir.
Stormwater is another sort of unique aspect for solar in Freeport. So we do require, through our definition of structure, so ground-mounted solar panels are considered structures under our ordinance. Our definition of structure talks about anything above the ground, not just, kind of fastened to the ground. So the whole panel area in a solar farm or solar array is considered impervious, and therefore it brings into consideration when you're talking about stormwater management that the entire panel area has to be treated for stormwater management purposes. So, when we look at section 529 of our zoning ordinance and stormwater management, when it talks about treating for quantity and quality, the applicant will have to do it not just for the part of the solar system mounted in the ground, but for that whole area. But that'll be followed up in the full application submission, and we'll have that, as usual, reviewed by our peer review engineer. One question that came in from board member just over email to provide more info on them in the staff report. You'll notice in our solar performance standards, there's a decommissioning plan requirement. So the general process for that is that as part of the final application submission, you'd require the decommissioning plan to be part of that. The board would approve the plan as part of the overall approval. There's no special approval necessary for the decommissioning plan itself. It's just kind of part of the overall plan and application approval that the board would go through. But it should outline a few things: how the applicant will remove all of the solar components, any disposal of solid or hazardous waste, and then stabilization and revegetation of the site to its pre-existing condition once the panels are removed. And then, just as we usually put a condition of approval on a project, that they provide a performance guarantee to complete all the site work. With solar projects, there's an additional performance guarantee that's either through an escrow account or a letter of credit that covers the cost of that decommissioning at 125%, I think, of the cost of the decommissioning. So that's the part that kind of stays in place to verify that, should the project be abandoned or anything like that, that the town would have the ability to go in and remove it. Other than that, there's not too much to add from the town standpoint. I did reach out to the fire chief for comment, and that was one of the things I believe I noted in the report, but that we should follow up on just to get confirmation before the final application submission. So right now, off of Prout Road, the applicant's proposing a 15-foot wide access to the solar system. That meets our zoning requirements for access. For a one-way access, 15 feet wide is fine. But I do want to verify with our fire chief that they're good with that. The typical NFPA two-way access requirement is 20 feet, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily applicable here. It could be that they are fine with one way, but want to see an extra turnaround or bump out somewhere along the way or something like that. But it's just a conversation that should happen before the final approval and submission.
Kyle, I've got a question or clarification. This is my first time with solar farms, so it's all new to me. But the definition in the town ordinance says a large solar farm must be less than 10 acres, and the application says it's for 12.4 acres, so I'm sure I'm missing something there.
Yeah, it's two different things. So what's considered solar development area under our definition is different than what the applicant, I think, included in their 12-acre number. I think what's...
I'd be happy to speak to that as well.
It's more like 6 acres maybe is the solar development area that's being proposed. I think the 12 acres that they're talking about, as they say, includes the array themselves, the gravel drive, the utility corridor. So that access drive and things like that would not be included in our zoning definition of development area. So they do fall within that 2 to 10.
Maybe as we go forward, if
range.
we can just make sure to clarify it's
Yeah.
6 as far as the
Yeah.
definition goes then. Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Kyle? Okay.
Okay.
Andrew?
Have Mike start, and we'll go back and forth.
Okay, good.
All right. Members of the board, thank you for having us. For the record, Mike Sudak, Attar Engineering, and Mr. Andrew Keller of NH Solar Garden here with me. Thank you for the very proper lead-in, Kyle. Covered the bulk of my surface level view. The remainder of my kind of overview, west end of Prout Road here, the MDB district, just over 45 acres. And the breakdown, you just barely beat me to it, for acreage contributions. For the purposes of that 2 to 10 range, we're at 6.2 acres for, I believe, what's called your solar generation area by your town's definition, what the state calls occupied area. So that's everything inside the perimeter fence. That includes your travel aisles, so to speak, all of the tables themselves for the PV panels, and then the additional just over 6 acres, making the 12.4 that you see on our application is for shade management clearing, and then the access drive to service the site. Beyond that, I can get into a bit of the details of what will be involved from an environmental and stormwater perspective, but if the board would be interested, I'd be happy to have Andrew speak to the decommissioning side and maybe just some general questions that this board may have, since I'm not sure if they've had a development of this scale in solar come into town yet, but happy to take it over.
So again, thank you to the board. Thank you, Kyle, for all the intro. Again, my name is Andrew Keller from New Hampshire Solar Garden. I'm the developer on behalf of Prout Road Solar, which is the entity that is applying for all of its permits. What I'd like to do is give the board a little bit of background about our process as it compares to what we normally do in a solar project. So I've been developing solar projects across New England for about 15 years. We have 2 other projects in the state of Maine that we've permitted pretty much a little bit ahead of this, like almost to the start of construction phase. As some of you may or may not have followed over the years, there's been a lot of excitement around solar in the state of Maine. Some people like it, some people don't. There's been some pushback at the legislative level of slowing things down a little bit. And as we were developing some of our other projects and experiencing some of those starts and stops and some of the changes in the rules, we wanted to be a little bit more methodical with this project. We were glad to see that the town had an ordinance that we can follow. It's always easier for us as developers and engineers when there's a plan that we can follow versus trying to work in between some of the nuances of zoning ordinances. So we're grateful to have that to work with. I decided from a development perspective to focus on a couple of key parts of this before we came in front of your board at any level or in front of staff. And it was mostly focused around the utility process with CMP and the wetland and vernal pool analysis. Those can be 2 very important fatal flaws, if I'd like to call them that, that can affect a project moving forward. And while I love Mike and all his work he does, I don't really want to spend the money with him if we have a bigger issue to overcome. So we spent the time during the vernal pool window last year, not this past year, but the year, over a year ago, to make sure that we were in the window when vernal pools can be reviewed. We took that information in while we were working through the process with CMP. During that process with CMP, we recognized that the current rules we were not going to be able to meet the deadlines of the end of 2024 for a project to be built to be at a certain specific size. So when we realized that we didn't have that ability to meet that, just there wasn't enough time in the year, we chose to follow I would say, the more step down rules, which allowed us to do a project of this size, which is about half of what we originally were contemplating. So we followed through. There was a little bit of start and stop with CMP. There was the kind of analysis of the wetlands working, and we do have the landowners here this evening. I don't know if they'll need to answer any questions for the board, but we do have Mike and Shirley here, who are the landowners. So if there's any specific questions about the land, legacy questions, I don't want to put them on the spot, but they're here in case we need them. But we spent a lot of time with them making sure that this location and layout would meet their needs both today and maybe future legacy planning for them as a family. So I can report to the board now that we obviously have the wetland survey. We have, Mike and his team did all the survey work, so we are looking at an actual plan that's real. We know where it's going to go. We've done the design work on the panels to make sure how much of that potential shade management area we do need to manage and make sure it doesn't affect the solar panels. We have the approvals from CMP, and so that's a good thing. We also, what I'd like to touch on too, because you brought it up, Kyle, about the decommissioning process. So when we started in Maine doing these projects back about 4 or 5 years ago now, the decommissioning process with the state was being worked out. There was a process, we followed it, we submitted some paperwork, you got your decommissioning approval. The state kind of oversaw that process. Since then, there's been some maturity in that process. And it takes a little bit of time. So we wanted to make sure that we had the state's oversight on our decommissioning plan. So we have already submitted for that, meeting that 125% amount that you were referencing, Kyle. Mm-hmm. So we have that process it's happening right now. I don't believe it's been officially approved yet. And part of that process is to make sure that we have that proper bond that was mentioned as well. So we're kind of doing a little bit disjointed. Sometimes we have a little bit more of a sequential flow of how we do things. But we also want to be a little bit cautious and make sure that we handled some of the concerns of the landowners, made sure some of the concerns around the wetlands and the utility process and the policy, rules and regulations as they were ever changing, we could meet them. So that's kind of where we are right now. One of the big things just around decommissioning, I'll finish up here and pass it back to Mike to go through some of the technical kind of components to the project and answer any questions, is that the decommissioning process in our industry has evolved rapidly in the last probably 5 or 6 years. When I was doing some of my earlier projects, and we do stuff from small rooftop sonic businesses all the way up to large scale, much larger than this, kind of ground mount projects and everything in between, decommissioning was really not a big part of the conversation, if you can believe it. I mean, there was a little bit of concern, but there really wasn't a mechanism, it wasn't a process. So putting surety bonds in place, having a decommissioning plan that was reviewed by an engineer, backed up by, what is the scrap value of some of the materials? What are we going to do with this material on-site and off-site? How are we going to handle the small amounts of waste that does come out of these projects and these panels? And so I just want to report to the board that there's a lot of consideration that's brought into that process. There's steel, there's aluminum. Nothing is going to find its way into your, transfer station. These are going to be taken off-site, palletized, the panels specifically. They're going to be taken to a facility. A lot of the larger panel manufacturers actually have either divisions of their companies or have started companies to properly recycle this equipment. So you can picture it as a panel that gets taken apart and effectively ground down to its smallest pieces, separated as it goes through the process, and pulled out the parts that are beneficial to the recycling or the scrap process. You're eventually going to get down to a very small component that is going to have a waste factor, like your cell phone or anything else that is of that caliber of waste that will have to be managed through the decommissioning process. Again, to Kyle's point, having the surety bond in place, and that will give a comfort for both the landowners as well as the town that, God forbid, if none of us are here in 10 or 15 years, there's something to take care of these issues. And there's going to be no issues with groundwater. The stuff that's inside these things, the only way to get any of that into our groundwater is you would have to grind it up as in the smallest form. bring in some form of liquid acid, turn it into liquid, and then disperse it in the soil. And then even then, the heavy metals can't go that far. So, we have some of that feedback from some geologists and engineers that understand how those heavy metals can be impacted. So again, it has to be a really unlikely event where there would be any impact to the environment. But again, I'll leave with this. The benefit of having a board like yourselves, having the state to go through, having this decommissioning process we have to go through with the state, there's multiple different eyes. And fortunately for Freeport, I don't believe you have very many of these projects in your town from my knowledge. And therefore, you guys are having the benefit of many years of the state and a lot of the engineers figuring out how to best put these projects in place and make sure that we protect the environment around us. So I'll leave it with that. I'm happy to answer any specific solar questions. Engineering is all him, so feel free to
I'd like to ask you a couple questions, but first, anyone else on the board have a question?
I have just a couple informational questions. I think you partially answered the hatched areas having to do with the tree clearing area 1 and 2, having to do with shade control. But what's the distinction between 1 and 2?
Would you like me to start with that?
I can start and you can supplement.
Go for it.
Sure. Yeah, so tree clearing 1, I believe, which is closer to the occupied area itself. It's a variable width clearing area, and everything within that, you see a 60-foot dimension there south of the occupied area. That area itself is going to be cutting, but no stumping and grubbing. Really, the purpose here is southern exposure. And then that's going to wrap around the entirety of the site. We're bound to the north and west by, there's a USGS stream back there, so we have a stream protection setback that we have to adhere to. And then for tree clearing 2, that is basically the full width that you would need to guarantee full exposure, but that is a bit variable in its own right because it depends on the existing canopy that's out there. The site is forested, but at least based on testimony I've heard from Andrew and the landowners, it used to be a field at one point in time, so what's out there might not require the full length of proper cutting and no stumping and grubbing again. But
yeah, I think a good statistic to keep in mind when we talk about shade management is that if you have a 10-foot tree, I'm going to make up a number, you typically want to be twice the height away from it. So you want to be about 20 feet away from it, so it allows you to have the maximum exposure to the southern, east, and west sides of the panel, so you don't have any impact to the shading of those panels. So that outer area that Mike was referring to, may be just a selective cut. Some of the large bull pines that are up there that are also could be dangerous too, falling on the panels or on the fencing or et cetera. One other point to make out there, you'll see there's a 20-foot area which is just outside of the fence line. So that area is going to be cleaned and maintained. So we have both inside the fence line is going to be just basically a meadow, and just outside we're going to have some space around the fence line so we can make sure that there's room to maneuver on the outside. And just a real sidebar point is that the typical fencing in these type of rural environments are going to be an agricultural friendly fence. So they're going to typically be raised up 6 inches so the small critters can move freely underneath, and the big ones aren't likely to get in and up and over, but they're more agricultural friendly fencing that we use in these types of environments. So that's also an important thing, so we make sure that the animals can still move freely around and not get caught up inside the fences themselves.
Let's just follow up on vegetation type comments for zoning. The solar performance standards does allow for clearing for like the necessary shade obstruction areas, but the board does have room to still look at preserving landscaping outside of that and buffering standards. As you notice, more along Prout Road, you have some existing residential uses. So if there was a kind of area that required more buffering or something, that's still something the board can look at and consider.
Yeah, and outside of those areas that are hatched are going to be the existing vegetation. And then with the areas that are going to be cut and stumped, the intent is not necessarily to maintain that low growth. Like we want the natural growth to start to come up. The best way to shield any form of development is natural growth. A bunch of arborvitaes don't really do you a whole lot of good if you just have natural growth that's going to fill in over time. So the intent of those areas is to make sure that, again, that 10-foot tree doesn't grow up to 10 feet in shade if it's within 20 feet of the panels, for example. So that area, like you said, and Mike might be able to get into it later about how that impacts the stormwater, which we'll be bringing back to the board, obviously, at the next meeting. But we're not motivated to clear more than we need to because that creates cost and that creates bigger, stormwater requirements. So we want to be conscious of what we can do to make sure the array performs at its best ability, but we also, as you can kind of see with some of the natural components of the wetlands and location, we did our best to really put it in a good place where, again, there is room for potential future legacy planning for the landowner if they have any other ideas for the land they might want to consider. But most importantly, make sure it's really far away from any neighbors, abutters, using the natural vegetation as a tool to, keep the views away.
I have to take a short break and get some water.
Go for it.
Let me ask a question because I apologize. I don't remember. It's probably on the plan, but I don't recall seeing it. Where's the actual connection to the grid?
Yep, so it will come down.
A follow-up question, you can answer both, is will this project require any significant upgrade to a portion of that connection grid
Right.
that will impact the community around it?
No, yes, let me answer your question. First off, it will come down Prout Road, so it will be and we will have to wait and see what CMP says. This is where we get into this fine area of like what we can present to a board and say, this is what we want to do. And then when it gets to the point where CMP is like managing the construction process, where they say, this is what we're going to do. Because they kind of have a different amount of ability what they can and can't do. You know what I mean? I say
We've all
that.
worked with CMP.
Right. I don't need to go down that path. But so yes, so the intention would be to maintain the poles, upgrade the poles within the allowance of what CMP can do today, regardless if it's for a solar project or not. These are not oversized poles. They're not anything bigger than what would otherwise be on that street if CMP chose to upgrade those lines. What I can't speak to yet is where those pole, like, is there going to be a change in the pole sets? Is there going to have to be anything upgraded there? But I would always say to a board that on these smaller scale projects, and this is considered small in the grand scheme of these type of solar projects, the improvements that the project is going to potentially bring to the community is an improvement because, as we all know, the grid is old, it's aging, so new poles, new lines is always a good thing for the more direct community. You know what I mean? Lots of times they'll be using wires that are insulated so we don't have to worry about limbs falling on them and turning the lights out on that street or that area. So while there are some improvements, there are going to be improvements. We do know that from CMP and the process they've gone through. I can't say that there's going to be I wouldn't suggest that there's a negative impact. If anything, it's actually going to be a positive impact because those lines and those poles are pretty old out there.
By the way, the reason why I'm bringing this up, two reasons actually. One is the issue is this, I imagine it's in your best interest to have a survivable network it's connected to because that's how you make your money too.
Correct.
And that, I see that as being something that might be an advantage to the served neighborhood, to have a more survivable, reliable grid around them.
Right.
The other side of that, though, is I guess I would like to encourage you as part of this process to meet with and discuss these things with the neighbors.
Absolutely.
Because if there will be construction, new poles going in, new distances between connection points, et cetera,
Yep.
that all has impact on abutters. And again, I don't know how far away from this site those improvements will be necessary as well.
Yep.
So I would just encourage you as you continue this through the process that you consider including the community in some of that discussion.
Yeah, and that's great advice, and it's part of, I can tell you it's already embedded in the process with CMP. So once we get to that point where their construction team has identified how to physically connect, like we know roughly where we want to go, but they're going to go out there and look at it and make sure it's all done correctly. It then requires that step. If there's a guy wire, as they call them, like a support wire that comes down and goes outside of the CMP's roadside easement area, there might be a spot right there that's on one of the neighbors next to their driveway or something like that. So there will be that process. We will have to make sure that everybody understands what's happening, And I appreciate your comments about the improvements are beneficial, because again, all it takes is a small tree to fall on an old wire, and middle of winter, you're out of power, which is never fun. So, but thanks for the suggestion.
Just a follow-up quick.
Go ahead.
It's on par. You may have said it while I was gone, but is it a three-phase line? Okay.
Correct.
And mine is, again, more naive, but so from the array to CMP on Prout Road, is that connection on poles? Is it underground? It's on,
Correct.
so there'd be new poles on the landowner's
On the property side, exactly, once you come off the street. So typically what happens is those poles, CMP doesn't really like those to go underground, but from our experience of dealing with them, from a maintenance perspective, or, because what will happen is, again, we will be paying for, the project will be paying for those upgrades down Prout Road and then all the way down to about where the kind of hammerhead is as you come close to where the solar panels are there. And that's typically where the transformer is. So from the lines all the way to the transformer is owned by CMP. So they need access to that. And then obviously, not obvious to me, from the transformer back through the solar array, all that is then owned by the project. So if the transformer, has an issue, breaks down, that's on us. Versus where, like, if you have a business and there's a transformer in the pole that's owned by CMP and it blows up or has a malfunction, they're coming out to fix it on their dime. So again, we obviously all live in New England. We know we like to grow rocks in this part of the country. So underground is not always a great option, and CMP always pushes back on that as well for maintenance purposes.
Quick, go ahead, Linda.
Quick question that more for my interest, I think, a little bit. But is this what I understand to be like community solar that outside people can purchase into it?
You got it.
So when you're using the word community, you're not talking about the immediate landowners, you're talking about the community of people that own the shares in the solar. So community to me would have been the people that live around it. We want to make sure they're okay with what's happening. Am I not on?
You are now.
Oh, I thought it was.
I could hear you.
I'm sorry. So that's what I was just,
That's a good question, and there's a slight definition clarification I want to make for you, because you almost got it. So traditional community solar, as you were describing, is when like 10 people come together and each person owns a tenth of the number of panels. Maybe they each bought 10 panels in the array. That was the original concept around community solar as we know it as an industry. That's not what this is. So this is under the Net Energy Billing, NEB program in Maine, which you may have heard of. And it's meant for the community, and the way to define community in this project is anybody who's in CMP territory. Preferably people in the neighborhood starting, whenever we do these projects, and I always have this little spiel I share with the board and the public if they're listening, is we love to have this conversation. We love to have the community, the local community, be a beneficiary of the power. And that's why we do community solar in these. Like, we talk about it in front of a board, it's over the live stream, and people get excited about it, but then we have to go get the rest of our permits and get people who want to sign up to be able to go start construction. And then people see the project go up and running, like, oh, I really want to sign up. And unfortunately, it's too late then. So we always want the community at large to hopefully hear us, or the word gets spread around that there is a project that they could sign up for. The intent of this one is specifically for mostly residential and small businesses to benefit. That seems to be a part of the demographic that has sometimes been left out in the opportunity to save money on their electric bill. The big users, the schools, the hospitals, people like that seem to be your first target when you're going after people to buy your power. So, short answer to your part, the intention would be to have people in the neighborhood specifically to be able to sign up and save 10 or 15% off their electric bill. But that could extend to you if you live in another part of town, as long as you're within CMP. And if you live, I don't think you do, but if you live in another town, you're in CMP, you would have the benefit of signing up as well.
okay,
So if
clarifies.
I may, just to make sure I'm going to understand as well, so the model would be, I'm someone in the community, would I just buy a subscription for a certain percentage of power from the site or something like that?
Almost. So it would be based on how much power you use at your home. So if you spend $1,000 a year on your electric bill, let's just say, and you could sign up and save $100, $150 a year, it would show up as a credit on your bill. So we have a group that works to kind of sign up customers. They work with the utility to make sure that the on-bill credit, as they call it, is applied to your bill. So, you're saving money, not writing a check for $150 necessarily, but you're saving that amount of money.
Thank you.
We like to know that we're dealing with people who have been down this road before, or if they haven't. You told us about 2 projects in Maine that aren't constructed yet, but I have a sense you've done other projects in other states.
Oh, yeah. Yes, sure. So as I said, 15 years of developing and building these projects across New England. I started my business as a New Hampshire-based entity, raised my kids. I'm from Maine. Well, let me rephrase that. I started coming to Maine when I was 3 months old. I was not born in Maine, so I'm not from Maine. But most of my life I spent in southern Maine. And my brothers and my mother until recently lived down in the Wells area. So I appreciate the Maine community, but I started my business in New Hampshire. We had a lot of this community solar type activity in New Hampshire, so our company has been responsible for the majority of the projects that are constructed today in New Hampshire. We've done a lot of projects that are pretty sensitive. We did the first 2 landfill projects in the state of New Hampshire that's ever been. They're up and running. They've been around for about 7 or 8 years now. We're on our 5th or 6th landfill that we're developing to be built very soon. So short answer is yes, a lot in Massachusetts, a lot in New Hampshire, none in Vermont, none in Rhode Island, some in Connecticut, and now here in Maine.
And the financial model that you just described to us is similar to what you've used elsewhere?
Exactly. Yep.
Thanks so much.
Each market's a little different. Like, different state rules allow you to do certain things. Like New Hampshire and Maine are pretty similar in how you can do that credit I was referring to. Massachusetts has a similar mechanism. So it kind of depends on what the policy allows for. But to answer your question, my business model has been community solar for going on 15 years now.
Okay. And also, to pick up on a comment Fred made, he said that he's not been on the board for many, many years. Mm-hmm. He said it was the first he's seen. This is actually the first we've had.
Oh, really? Oh, I thought Ella, for some reason I thought Ella Bean may have done one.
We had the one that was off by, behind one of the boatyards on Main Street.
But it didn't go anywhere.
No, I know
Oh, okay.
that, but I mean, it came to us.
So you've
and
seen
it
it,
did
but never built.
to that point,
Got it.
But didn't go further.
I like to joke sometimes, and I was pleased to see the applicant ahead of us. I always kind of joke that our solar projects are like a parking lot with a fence around it. Like what we do is not really, it's not easy, but it's kind of a simple concept here. And so I'm glad you've gotten to see it. The construction part of this process is pretty tame. I mean, a project of this size is probably a 3 to, depending on the time of year, 5-month construction process. The first month is the more heavier, clearing the trees, getting it ready, getting the racking in the ground. And after the racking is up and running, it's manpower that's physically putting the panels on the racks, connecting the wires. So it's a pretty quiet construction site for the most part, and it's pretty quick. And then I always like to say it's like living next to a cemetery once it's built. There's no noise. I can guarantee you that the Amazon truck will come down the street more times in a day than we'll go out to that site in a year, because our maintenance is typically 2 to 4 times a year, and we all know Amazon likes to come down our streets more than that in a day, typically.
And the site that we see these sites all over the state of Maine. Mm-hmm. Are they the same financial model generally?
Yes. Yep. They were all developed. All of these were. Let me rephrase that. There are 2 methodologies of getting these projects built. The majority are on this net energy billing, the NEB program that Maine has had up since I think 2020. And then there is an RFP process for the larger scale. If you've heard of any of the real large, like 30, 40, 50 acres, utility scale, they consider those. More up in the central and northern Maine regions, we've seen some of those. One down in Sanford, that was a pretty big one that was in the press a bit. Those were part of an RFP that the utilities put out. You had to bid in, kind of lowest bid, big projects. These are a little bit different. These follow the supply rates of what CMP and Versant and the other utilities offer you as a customer.
So just so I'm sorry to drill into this.
No, keep going.
So if I understand the business model, you have the capital cost to install this, and then your production cost plus your distribution cost through CMP is low enough so because of net billing, you can offer a discount to specific subscribers.
Correct.
And the delta is your profit.
You got it. Exactly. Yep.
Good, thanks.
Given the number of installations you've done with various communities around New England, and given that we're all new to this, so tell us what issues you've run into with municipalities once you've gotten started. What are the things we should be
I start
watching
that
out
first.
for in this process?
Do you want it?
Fair question or
All right,
appropriate?
he's waiting. He's been
No.
feeling like he hasn't been able to say anything.
No, this has been great.
And both lists. We want the list of things you want us to hear and the things you don't want us to hear.
That's why I keep him honest on.
It's one major thing. Having worked with Andrew over the past 5 years on 3 other ones, all in York County, but it's the biggest pain point for me has been having not a properly fleshed out ordinance. The fact that Freeport has its own set of performance standards specific to this use, as opposed to us trying to fit into the hat of a public utility facility or something else that maybe this specific project doesn't meet the intent of why that ordinance was crafted. This is wonderful. So that's the big thing that I wanted.
It sounds good, and you're patting us on the back, but
We are.
I mean, there must be some other things
Oh,
we should be
they're
aware of.
absolutely, and I would say probably on the opposite of that is that when there isn't guidance, it leaves a lot of openness for interpretation and opinion. And that's where we kind of we've gotten into some issues with boards stating their opinion versus kind of following the facts of what we're trying to present. Concerns around neighbors and what is this impact to my neighborhood going to be? And that's why I kind of started the conversation with you folks tonight with like being a little bit more methodical, not just slapping it down and going on to the next one. It was like, okay, how can we make sure that this is a good use of this land for the landowners and the neighbors aren't going to see it? That comes up. I can make a lot. We've heard a lot of things. I've heard that planes are going to fall out of the sky because of the glaring of the panels. All the panels have anti-glare glass on them now. That's not going to happen. I've heard that if it's too close to my vinyl siding, it's going to melt the vinyl siding. I've heard that people are going to get cancer if they live near. We have heard a lot of the good, the bad, and the ugly. But from a community perspective, I think that the good and the bad, I would say, is when we work in communities that are very pro-business and are excited about having some renewable in their community. They don't want it everywhere, and we respect that. It's nice to work with a board, with a planner, with a code enforcement officer, with the folks that we will work with after we're all done here, and know that there is a process to follow and it's reasonable. When we get into kind of this is what it said, but that doesn't for example, we've had a city that had an ordinance for glare. They wanted to make sure there was no glare, and we had to have an FAA study. Well, we said, we can go to the FAA's website and plug in the coordinates and the details, and we can get a clearance. We don't have to go spend $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 on a study just to tell you the same thing that this report we have access to. And they're like, okay, that's reasonable. That will check the box within our ordinance. And, oh, by the way, send us an example of those panels that show the type of anti-glare glass that's being used, and that's good. So I think that's some of the goodness of working with communities that are reasonable in their expectations. We expect to be held at a high regard because these are new, and we want these to be done correctly. We want to be a good neighbor. But being reasonable is always a nice thing.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to give you a reference to a mayor in a New Hampshire community I've worked in where we've made it the solar capital of New Hampshire for the number of projects we've done because they wanted it. As a community, they wanted to have, and most of them are in industrial parts of the town, but I'm happy to, if the board wants to talk to anybody at the municipal level, I'm happy to share some references as well.
Yeah, just echo for the board that in other communities where I've worked and with other solar projects, the glare was typically what I heard for kind of community feedback, buffering and screening, the visibility of it in general. I mean, in this case, I noted in the staff report, the start of the developed area here is about 500 feet off Prout Road. So, I mean, looking at the plan, you might not get the scale, but the setbacks here are
Huge.
are pretty large. I mean, the setbacks in the district itself are 40 and 60 feet, but then the actual distance, between some of the property lines and the developed area are, more in the hundreds and from some property lines here. So it is fairly tucked back there.
Is there a road cut into there now?
It's a what'd you call it? A wood.
Yeah, it's a woods road, so
you.
no-
If we want to do a site walk, it's easily accessible.
Yeah, The first, I'd say 400 feet of our proposed access drive is about 700 to the start of the perimeter fencing. The first more than half of that is a woods road that we would be expanding upon and then continuing from its terminus. So yeah, I would think.
And to add to that, which another step that we've already done in this process, which sometimes usually comes later, but for the sake of trying to catch up, we always do a geotechnical survey to understand how the racking, what type of racking we need to use. There's typically two types. You can pile drive like an I-beam into the ground if the soils allow for it, or you can screw it in, and there's different types of screws. Like I said, we know we have a lot of rock in this part of the country, so we went out there, that's been done, so there are some kind of paths cut so we can get the equipment out there to do those, so there is accessibility, and the landowner has done a great job of keeping some trails out there for their own firewood needs and some of their own activities out on their property.
Want to tell us about the project now? We're almost out of time, though.
All right.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Lynn, you got a question?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I want to skip to something different that's a little more, I shouldn't say more important for me, but I'm always interested in wetlands and the vernal pool areas that have already been looked at, and I love the pictures. The little gooey guys that
That's
you
right.
pull out of the water.
Caviar, yeah.
I think, and if I'm reading this properly, the one that is the wetland of special concern is down by the road entrance. That's the one, that number 7, I think.
Yep, you just barely beat me to it. That's the first thing I was going to touch on.
Okay, well, good. So I want to make sure that that road construction, which seems to be, from this scale, it's hard to exactly tell, but it seems to be somewhat close to that, that it's totally protected, and I know that the state deals with that, but to make sure that the construction of the road or the widening of the road or anything is totally protected. And I'm going to jump back to site walk potential. If we do have a site walk, can you make sure, and maybe you need to wait until you have more specific plans coming to us, that all and particularly that vernal pool is totally marked and delineated, as well as your other areas, because we've been on various site walks over time, and it's kind of like left up to us to say, oh, over there is the so-and-so and over there. So I would appreciate if things are very
absolutely.
well delineated in the field, and if it's still wooded in the back, that you give us a good path that's chopped through.
Yeah, we can do that. And I will say that the way these conversations go, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time we're talking about the solar stuff, and then 20% of the time he gets to talk. So this is pretty normal for us to go through a lot of these type of back and forth questions. So, being new to the board or being new to the community, that's why we like having these conversations, because we want you to understand what we're talking about. But why don't you kind of take them through some of the wetland stuff, which is pretty important.
I didn't mind the voice rest. So I'll start right with the environmental stuff up front. So our full wetland delineation for both, actually, this parcel and the westerly abutting parcel, because that was something we looked into back in 2021. But anyway, so all those delineations were done. That's the kind of lighter hatch that you see across the site. But yeah, you beat me to it. There were 7 different vernal pools or potential vernal pools that were identified over the course of the site. 6 of them in the rear of the property. You can see them there along the top right edge of the screen there. But yeah, the only vernal pool that was determined to be of significance due to egg mass was the one right up against Prout Road, likely impounded by both Prout Road and the existing woods road that's there. And yeah, like you said, you saw the pictures in our packet. All of the egg masses, about as many spotted salamander egg masses as I've ever seen. So very, very active vernal pool. And that was really what made the decision to have our development go along the existing woods road be really the only choice. Expand upon that, keep the impact to a minimum. No matter what, we're going to be pursuing, and we've already gotten underway to pursue I'm going to throw a lot of acronyms at you here, but through the Natural Resource Protection Act Division, DEP, it's a Section 19 permit by rule for activities adjacent to a significant vernal pool. There's a radius from that dark hatch that you see, 250 foot, that's your critical terrestrial habitat. So we are required to preserve 75% of that area. And really, we're going to come nowhere near close to that. It's just to extend the travelway through. We have pretty limited frontage, so we have to go through that radius no matter what. But to keep the impact to a minimum, we just wanted to expand that Woods Road as minimally as possible in that area. So
Can you
that's,
speak to the fact that it looks like most of that vernal pool is on the adjacent property? Does NERPA, the way they regulate, I know about the radius and the impact, percentage, but does it matter that it's on an adjacent property? Does that bring anything else into play that you aren't required to do or are required to do? Not that, what you're proposing, I think, meets the standard anyway that they have, but.
I think the general rule of thumb I operate off of is if both the vernal pool and its contributing wetland complex are entirely off the site, then you don't necessarily need to consider a CTH. But in this case, where just a portion of it and a good chunk of the wetland complex that feeds it are on the property, we want to pursue that anyway. And in our consultation with IF&W and with the state as part of the processing of this permit, if they end up figuring out that an animal crossing beneath that driveway is more appropriate to, because we're going to be improving that travelway, if it makes sense to have an animal corridor from, I guess, the west side of this travelway over to the complex, if that makes sense, in addition to however they get there. Otherwise, that's something that's important to us. And did I answer your question?
Yeah, I would also throw in for us to make sure we consider the time of the year that they do the work when you are doing the work in that area, so you keep away from,
Yeah, absolutely.
Small window.
Yep.
Before you leave the vernal pool topic, I appreciate this is a state regulation you're dealing with, not town of Freeport, but help me understand why you wouldn't be moving the access road away from the two wetlands you go through and away from the vernal pool.
You can't really quite see it, but the shape of the land as you go that way.
It's only 2-foot contours, it looks like. Is it quite a bit grade change?
Yeah, that was kind of, and I think to Mike's point about, using the existing, like maybe you can speak to a little bit more about why using an existing travelway is better than creating a new one.
Yeah, from a topographic standpoint, it doesn't drop off significantly, maybe 10 or 12% from there, coming down the hill. But I think if you look at your animal egress corridor to that vernal pool, you assume that the Woods Road is utilized in part, and I think improving that to the degree that's necessary for this, we're not proposing the use, like Andrew said, it's once per month, if anything, and I think we're proposing a 15-foot travelway, but you have that berm that already exists, and you improve that berm as opposed to maybe 80 feet further west along the road, you create another one that's more of an impediment to any animals that want to use that complex. That was the thought process. You already have an impact. It's not documented with the state, so our NERPA PBR is going to assume a virgin site and then have our 25% max impact be based on that. I hope I'm doing a good job answering this.
If I may, I think, because this is very technical to me as well, and I think what we were trying to achieve is using what is existing, because we've had some experience with other vernal pools and the importance of, from the state's perspective, to kind of maintain what is already naturally being used and what may have already, why that was created. The landowners had shared some feedback that a certain number of years ago that was never there. That was that was formed from just natural runoff. And how all the little guys, critters got there to make it their favorite home, who knows? But, I think the goal here is to, again, continue to make sure that we can maintain some buffer with the neighbors' properties, because if we start going down, down the street a little bit, we're starting to go closer to some other, it's still pretty far away, but we were trying to keep everything as tight to the current landowners, their house is next door, so that owns the property. So keeping it all kind of close to them, maintaining the existing disturbance, and then looking for the state to give us guidance on what, if there's any feedback to Mike's point about, having some travel way underneath the access road. Those are things that we're prepared to do to make sure we preserve that, protect it, and obviously don't do any construction during the time of year when there could be impacts.
Thanks.
Just another question. I'm assuming that maximum 25% impact zone within that circle is cumulative.
Yes.
So it's not just this property. It's if any of the other neighbors who are within that circle also decide they want to put in a driveway, do some other change, that would be cumulative to what you do on this?
It's on parcel contributions. So if I was to refine that offset to be specific to what our permit is going to be applied from, it would be trimmed at the property line. So that you take that entire hatch area, that's the 100% from which you're required to preserve 75% of. So each prospective parcel that happens to fall within 250 feet of that, they have their own on-parcel area that they're required to preserve.
So their own parcel allocation, so to
Yes,
speak, of
allocation.
that 25%.
Yes.
And so even given the fact that this circle impacts multiple additional properties, you're still going to be falling within your allocation?
Yes.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was referring to, Drew, when I brought up the property boundary thing, that when vernal pools are sometimes the 250 feet area can go over a property line, but the vernal pool might be located on a different property, so it's not.
I just wanted to make sure that if their impact on this project was going to reduce the potential usefulness of property to others within that circle,
Yep.
that they could be notified of that at least prior to this coming to any sort of vote.
Yep.
But it sounds like that they have their own, if I understood them correctly, they have their own allocation that isn't impacted by them utilizing their allocation as long as they stay within that
Yep.
allowable amount, whatever that happens to be on this one particular site.
Right. And if I may point out too, this is intended to be a gravel, obviously, access. And you've got Prout Road, arguably almost closer to that vernal pool that is an asphalt road and has runoff from the asphalt, has salt from the winter. So while we are creating a new access, our access is not going to be traveled however many times. I just want to point out that you have a paved, active road that's probably closer to that vernal pool than our gravel road, which is going to be traveled 2 or 3 times a year once after construction is complete.
Got it.
You did say you're going to be enhancing that gravel road, making it wider, didn't you say that?
Yeah, it's just a woods road right
So you
now.
will be doing a construction project?
Absolutely, yes.
In quotes, along and near that
Yeah.
vernal pool
And
area.
does the state specify that we can't do construction? We obviously wouldn't, I don't think, but do they specify that we can't do construction during the vernal pool hatching season typically?
I don't believe
Especially when it's that close.
they specify it. They instead require, I think, double E and erosion sedimentation barriers within that CTH.
Protect that area?
I don't believe they limit it like they do for other species.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one, though.
But typically, using the construction season for these type of projects, it's always ideal to be able to cut the trees when the ground's hard. So, in a perfect world, depending on how everything goes with CMP and the process with you and with the state, the way this is lining up, this could be a perfectly lined up where we do that type of work in the winter. And then after the mud season, you really get in there and get going, but then almost in a perfect world, we might be able to have all that work done before you're anywhere near that hatching season of, was it April, May, June-ish, or May, June-ish? Depends on the time of year. the
April,
season.
May.
April, May?
Yeah.
So in a perfect world, a lot of that heavier work would be done not even around that sensitive time as well, just by where we are in the process today.
Does the state DEP, do they have to give you a separate permit to do the work?
To do the work, meaning,
Around-
Construction
Around
itself.
the vernal pool? I mean, you notify them,
yep,
but do they have to give their own permits as we have to do also
Yes.
for that? So,
that was the Section 19 PBR I was describing. So that's the process through NERPA that we would apply for. We would submit our IF&W feedback and consultation with a species expert if necessary. Probably the reptile expert, given what is out there. But yeah, they would process an order as part of that permit application, and that's independent of what goes on in front of you guys.
so for our commission, we usually put
It's
that
subject
in
to.
as something,
Subject to.
you know, that
Absolutely.
should get done.
yeah,
But we would.
They have to have all their permits.
Yep,
Yeah.
we do,
Yes.
But
absolutely.
maybe we make sure we have that, you know, in advance, because we want to know that they're keeping an eye on it.
Yep.
I mean, just, you know, you never know when somebody brings a tractor in at the wrong time, but, you know, I think it would be a good idea.
Typically, when we condition those, the DEP permits need to, you provide evidence of it. We use that prior to issuance of a building permit. So they could get their approval here while the DEP approval, which is usually a longer process than what we go through locally, is ongoing. They wouldn't be able to start any work, though.
Okay, that's what I
Yeah,
was hoping.
so
that we
you,
do that.
even if the board conditions it, it doesn't mean that, the next day after an approval, they're gonna be out there doing work before their DEP approval comes in, so.
The only thing we did on site was survey work, which is people going out in the site, and that survey work for the geotech that I spoke to, and the landowners were, for the benefit of like ease and sensitivity around that, they were gracious enough to let us come in from their property near their house, because there's a trail from their house, so we were able to get the equipment out there and access it and steer clear of that until we had full transparency with the state and with the town. So we were already trying to be cautious from the get-go. But I think to Kyle's point, I mean, that's normal for us, as we expect those conditions, and we don't move a blade of grass until all the conditions are met.
Thanks.
I can speak to the other half of the permitting if you'd like. So I've been working with Kyle and members of town staff on this. From a stormwater perspective, again, you mentioned the delegated review earlier. I happen to work with Mr. Haskell pretty regularly in municipalities south of here, but yeah, so ordinarily for a project of this size, as Andrew brought up with the state's policy in the past, we would normally consider the impervious generations to just be the access drive, and then the impact site of the panel properly as its foundation hits the ground. That's not the case in Freeport, as Kyle highlighted in his memo, so the square footage of the entire panels themselves is going to be what our impervious generator is. And with that much, we get kicked into effectively the equivalent of a full stormwater management law permit. So that's what our stormwater design will be based off of, and what we'll be working with Grohl Palmer on. The site generally pitches, as you're looking at the sheet here, from bottom to top towards that stream that kind of hugs the northwestern property line. So all of our stormwater infrastructure will be effectively in the shade management area on that side of the array before you get that stream protection setback. I think we can keep out of it. If we can't, then that would be an additional stormwater PBR, which the previous applicant mentioned, for a discharge within that 75-foot buffer. But otherwise, I believe the array was cited to keep us out of that consideration. I think that's all.
And no concerns with water coming this way, because you have the natural wetland there and the way the topo's going the other direction.
Yeah, really. I mean, we'll see on the sidewalk, but along the Woods Road, and then once the Woods Road ends and our travelway extends, it's down gradient, continuing to push up the page as we're looking. So everything that is going to be maintained as forested, you'll have your natural attenuation, but and what we present to Grohl Palmer will show that we have developed condition increase in peak runoff in that complex, that stream complex, and off the property to the northwest is going to be the analysis point. So, yeah, like Andrew said earlier, it's pretty cut and dry from a grading and stormwater perspective. Just a little bit of additional impervious than what we normally consider for this use, but nothing that we shouldn't be able to manage with how the array was sited.
Your panel rows run north-south.
The panels move east-west.
And trackers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are
I was
lower.
going to ask that question because I think when I read the materials, it
I
made it
did
sound like they were
notice that, too.
stationary.
Yep.
I did notice that.
You got me on the clerical error there. They're not fixed tilt. They follow the sun throughout the day.
So they're going to be low. They're also, that means it's going to bring it down a little bit more lower profile to the ground also, which is good.
Be a lot more efficient too, which is good for you.
It's, we got to get every square inch because CMP doubled their prices on us after we already got our permits. So anything we can do to help is helpful. So I think that covers most of the kind of our process we've done to date, you know, a lot of background.
Yeah, I only have
Do you have anything else you want to add?
just one comment here, potentially for Kyle. You'd mentioned your outreach to the fire chief, and forgive me if this is an ignorant question. This is my first time in front of this town. But what type of sign-off would you like to see from the fire chief in that regard?
So I would just recommend communication, whether it's email
Okay.
or, you know, I emailed the plans to the chief along with, you know, the other usual department heads. I hadn't received any official comments. In passing, you know, I showed him the plan and talked it over a little bit. You know, we didn't land on any specific, you know, he wants to see X, Y, Z. So rather than waiting until you resubmit and me sending out the applications again, just to get a jump start on it, I just recommend, you know, a phone call or email to our fire chief to,
And
just so if there is a recommendation
Especially on
for
the
a
road.
bump out or something, you know, you can catch it earlier on than later.
I was saying, and at risk of speaking for our illustrious chair, which I won't do, but hopefully he will agree with this. I think as you do speak to the fire chief, having the fire chief put something in documentation back to Kyle would be important, because that we're going to want to see that as part of our approval
got it.
process.
So,
If you want to CC me on an email thread and,
yeah,
you know.
just historically what I've done is I've reached out to the fire chief and asked for their largest apparatus, or at least the largest apparatus that they're going to service this property with. And then I have a hat that sits on top of Civil 3D that can just route the vehicle through the site. Maybe that requires a more robust turnaround. We bump up to 20 feet for that specific section, whatever is applicable.
I don't want to speak for this
Understood.
specific
Yeah, yeah.
situation, but I know in the past when I've been involved in another similar project like this, you know, a concern raised from fire was in a one-way travel way, the idea of if there was an incident, being able to get a vehicle going in and out at the same time, and if it's only one way the entire length of the whole thing, the idea that where's one of those vehicles going to go. So, you know, an occasional bump out could help. But again, I completely defer to our fire chief on that, so. You know.
Understood. Thank you. That was all I had.
Yes.
So we'd love to hear any more questions that the board has, but also if the public has any questions, this is the appropriate time to ask the public if they have any questions for
Right,
us.
you are. This is not a public hearing.
Okay.
But we always invite public,
Okay.
public participation.
Fair enough. I know I think they were noticed, correct?
Yep.
And
And there will be for the site walk if we have one as well, which I'm going to recommend.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board before we open up public? Any questions from the public? Okay, come to the lectern and please tell us your name and your address before you start. There's a microphone there for you.
Oh, yep, sure thing.
Can you make it a little bigger?
What part do you want to focus on?
The lowland at the bottom where all your rain drainage is going to go to. So it's going to go into the stream and it's going to come down.
Can I ask you
into
to share your name and address before you start?
Hi, I'm Vicki Cray. You see the black dot down there? That's me, the bottom of the pond.
Show us
I
the
live
black-
on the other side.
Let's see the black dot.
Right in the middle of the pond, right there where all the drainage is coming off of.
Further
right there on the edge.
This
He's
is,
talking about, are
upper
you talking
left?
about further to the left of the screen? Up
That's
there.
the bottom. The whole thing is a hill. Water drains to the bottom. It drains to the low point, agreed? So my question is, are you going to be putting in a culvert, diverting drainage with pumps into one of these other areas? Because that pond has already ripped out our road 3 complete times. The town has rebuilt it. They've put in the largest culvert they could put. The town is going to have a huge impact with ripping the road again, building it up higher, putting in a larger culvert. That's a big expense if you don't put in a diversion system. You have other ponds you can divert it into, but you would have to run it along your fence line and into there. Every single storm we have right now, I watch that pond get ready to rip out the road. It's overflowing. This is a big impact. Town expense, let alone land erosion. Because every time somebody builds, it goes downhill more water. There's a big impact. I'm not against the system, I'm against do something with the water.
Well, and related to this, though, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you get a stormwater permit, because you're doing I don't know what you call it, but the bigger project
Yep.
to do that, what that does, I think, is ensure that the runoff from your site does not exceed the current runoff from the site despite your development. Is that correct?
Yeah, just a point of order, the protocol for me, do I respond to the abutter, do I respond to the board?
Thanks for that. You technically respond to the board, but answer the question.
Okay.
We're not ignoring the question.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. So yes, you're absolutely right. Part of the stormwater management plan, the HydroCAD model that's prepared for this project will be split into 2 products. It's your existing condition, the virgin site as it is undeveloped. And that's effectively what your control is going to be. And you're absolutely right, that pond is going to be your analysis point. That's the downstream recipient of everything in the area. So what we will be required to do is to show that the peak runoff at every storm event is Freeport a 25-year event? Yes. So up to the 25-year, 24-hour event, all of the peak runoff as it leaves the property. So before you have any attenuation offsite down to that pond is less in the developed state than your existing condition. And that's every rain event. So we have to prove that this development will not cause any adverse effects downstream offsite. And really the only place that, this isn't the old days where you can just have forested wetlands be your buffer. This is going to have to be handled surficially. So if you, and the next product that we get in front of the town here will show this in greater clarity and a more blown up scale. But effectively along that northwestern side of the perimeter fence, there's going to be a vegetated swale that catches everything that runs off the array in that direction and directs it down to some type of both quality and quantity pond, be an under-drained soil filter, be a bioretention basin, whatever makes sense for the horizons and the subsurface explorations that we get done. So you're going to have all of this runoff from the array concentrated in one specific area and then detained on site to a point at which the volume that leaves the site is going to be less than how it currently is, where it's just forested runoff that hits the stream.
And then if I may too, Mike, and then you're going to have your peer review to qualify that, review that.
Yeah, I mean,
their recommendation that it was done correctly. So it's his job to make sure it's done right to meet the requirements. It's also going to be, the reviewer, the peer reviewer, to make sure that we did it right.
Yeah.
Which is important too.
I just worked with Mr. Haskell for a project in York, and he knows HydroCAD in and out as well or better than I do. So
We
we're
just-
just fully qualified.
We just dealt with him in Standish. We just got an approval on one of the projects I talked about that is ready for construction. So we're very familiar with his review of our projects as well.
So as the member of the public, you understand what how our peer review process works? Yeah.
So you're going to be putting in a drainage pond to collect this runoff, is what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
So our ordinance,
Go for it. And explain.
yeah, so just to clarify, the conceptual meeting that we're having now for site plan review, for all site plan applications, we don't require full engineering for those conceptual plans. It's an opportunity to look more at the general layout and get initial comments. The next submission would require that full stormwater management plan, like they were talking about. Our stormwater management standards in the zoning ordinance require that, to the greatest extent possible, the stormwater is detained on site. So that could be through any number of ways, the swales, the basins, detention ponds, anything like that. And then you're managing for quantity and quality of that stormwater, and to verify that the impacts off-site aren't going to be more so than the existing condition now. And that's what our peer review engineer will verify through reviewing whatever they submit. And then the board will base their finding off of that.
And Vicky, thank you for bringing it up as a concern.
Yeah,
It's good
thank
for
you
all
very
of us
much.
to hear it. Thank you.
It's a big impact,
Sounds like it.
cost-wise, yeah.
Sounds like it.
Thank you.
Agree.
Any other members of the public have questions or comments? Any,
If I may ask, I know the owners are here. I don't know if you have any desire to say anything.
I got one little question.
come to the lectern and give us your name, sir, please.
I told you you didn't have to, Mike.
No, I'm Mike Winship, and the land that Vicky's talking about, that used to be close to a 20-acre field when I grew up. So their array back there is gonna be no different than it was when I was a kid and I had a figure 8 and a wide for fuel bombers back there. And, this land has grown in, but it's basically going back to where it was when I grew up, and my father had a great big field there. That was at least a 20-acre field. So the water that's running off that, when they do their job, shouldn't be any different than what really was there 20 years ago. So that's where I'm kind of at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board before we go ahead?
I had a clarifying question for Kyle when it comes to the decommissioning. That also include the stormwater work that would be developed to accommodate the installation?
Like decommissioning, like any pond or,
Yeah,
I don't think the decommissioning plan would, well, I'll have to look at it more closely. It talks about like like removing the solar components specifically, and then disposing of that waste properly, and then revegetating that area to the, existing condition, the pre-existing condition before the solar components went in. I don't know if it talks about taking out stormwater management features that were,
oh, yeah, I'm just,
Put in
What
as
the
part of it?
percentage of that would be.
I don't know, but it's like.
I don't think it
guess we'd want to
speaks-
know if it was somehow became required. Before
yeah,
that happened.
I want to say I don't think it would be required, but I can verify.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of like stuff in these, you know what I mean? Like if it's like kind of a holding pond or something like that, there might be like some berms and some stones or something like that in there, but there's not really a lot of like,
In this
Oh, this one, it would.
instance, because of Freeport's policy on impervious acreage, it will be a more robust than,
okay, so there would be something to remove, so
but
I stand corrected.
my experience on that is the decommissioning plan presents the ability for that infrastructure to be taken out, but that's also, decommissioning would occur when this project has met its life, and then the permit would need to be transitioned into whatever entity's coming next. So at that time, if whatever their pursuit's going to be doesn't require the continued use of that stormwater infrastructure, then it would come out. But I don't believe there's any specifics that require it to come out. It affords the opportunity to as part of a transition of the permit. Good point.
Yeah, I don't think the ordinance would require it, and I don't think that removal of the stormwater feature would be built into the cost that needed to be covered under the PG. So the solar ordinance requires those three things I mentioned before as being the components of the decommissioning plan. The removal of the solar components, so that's solar collectors, mounting hardware, electricity storage commission, transmission lines, related infrastructure, structures, foundations, supports, fencing, security barriers. So not any stormwater management feature included in that part. The disposal of all solid and hazardous waste in accordance with all, local, state, federal laws. And then stabilizing or revegetating the site as necessary to minimize erosion and return the site substantially to its pre-construction state. Native pollinator-friendly seed mixtures shall be used to revegetate to the greatest extent practicable. So
It kind of does cover it a little bit. Seems like
those
that
would be
kinda
the
goes it,
three
gets it
things
a
that the
little bit.
decommissioning plan really needs to accomplish.
Great. I think we should have a site walk. Anyone feel similarly?
Yeah.
I think so. If I may suggest, though, I think maybe when they're ready with their next plan, because at that point, we'll be able to actually highlight where the drainage areas are and, with much more specificity, because right now, even the CMP plan isn't approved at this point yet, so you don't know exactly what's going to be done where. We can do it earlier, I just think we may not get all our questions answered unless we
I
wait.
think it would help us to be able to see more of what their plan is and out in the field than now, because it's kind of, not that it's nebulous planning, but, you say that you have other things you have to get together.
Yes,
I think this might-
when are you looking to come back with the resubmission? In which
Question
month?
based on the time. If I may just, before he answers that question, what we found that has been beneficial is sometimes it's like, if the board has the ability to like start the meeting as the site walk and then come right into the meeting. Is that how you normally do it? Okay, that's great. That's been the most successful. So we have, like, to your point, we have the final plan that we want your, review and hopefully approval on, but you just walked it and you could kind of see it, touch it, feel it, and then you look on the screen and you see what we've done. So I think to lead into your question, is I don't understand the time and process to get back to you.
Yeah, again, potentially an ignorant question, I apologize. Is this application, or I guess I'll say it a different way, is the review period that's posted on your website and your ordinance, is that for all states of an application, or is that for new applications? And if I did a bad job explaining that.
So we would need the resubmission
Yep.
with the full application.
Yep.
The deadline's 21 days before whatever meeting you want to get on. So
Okay.
it's the Wednesday at noon.
Okay,
by
I just
noon.
want to make sure there was no vesting as we transition from new to old.
So we would need to know to set the site walk kind of in advance so we can get that on the agenda a couple weeks beforehand. So like if you knew, you were almost done all your stormwater plans and you were ready to resubmit next week for the October 15th meeting, it would be helpful to know that now. So when I was preparing the agenda, I could, put 5 o'clock site walk or whatever it is ahead of that meeting. But if you're not going to be ready until November or, so just that communication would be.
It's your call, and we'll do it,
Well,
we'll
just
do it at 5
practically-
o'clock that night.
Well, I was going to say, practically speaking, if doing it in December, January, February is probably not ideal, so
Yeah, right.
let's get it done by the November meeting regardless of where they're at, because I think that would still be helpful.
Proposal.
Yes, you guys want to trudge through the snow with us, or?
It's
how
all
we wanna do it?
consistent with I didn't mean to interrupt you. Is this all consistent with what the schedule you're thinking about?
Yes,
Okay, great.
I mean, in a perfect world, I would have loved to have him work from now until next Wednesday to get it done, but that's not realistic. I wouldn't do that to Mike. And he's going on vacation anyway, so
The November meeting.
Yeah, that-
Is agreeable.
that'll give enough time, and then I think we'll be on the right side of daylight savings.
When people,
Won't be
it's hunting
too
season.
dark for 5 o'clock.
When we send it
I
over.
want to check that.
Okay.
So if we schedule
Okay.
now,
Oh, yeah,
we
so
agree
it's-
and schedule for a site walk prior to the November meeting, and then for some reason they're not ready, we can just table that site walk just as well as any other thing.
Yeah, it's just going to be considerate of the darkness at that.
Yeah, we could either leave the site walk at November and just have it, like what Fred was talking about, in advance of them submitting the final application, or the board could decide to table the site walk and do it at a different hour, maybe during the day sometime
Yeah,
before,
clocks will have changed by then. too.
Yeah.
when they're ready to come back. Either way.
You let us know and Kyle will work it
Yeah,
out.
let us figure- 'cause-
But we can do it so you don't lose a meeting.
Yeah, I think we were trying to think, like, talk amongst ourselves, like, does it make sense to me try to get it on the October meeting, because we're not dealing with daylight savings, so we're not out there in the dark, coming back to the meeting, and then, but see if we can get as much work done. So you're looking at the site with a plan that's pretty close to what you're gonna see in the November meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
That might be an option.
I haven't, hopefully this isn't alarming to you, I haven't heard anything here that keeps me off of just being prepared to stake for the sidewalk right now. Like, I know where my stormwater infrastructure is going to go.
Right.
So,
And the flags are out there for the wetlands.
yep,
So
we can reconfirm
yeah, let us talk
that.
about it. We'll come back to you, Kyle. And maybe it's something we do in 2 steps. Maybe we don't do it in the same night, just because we're not. Again, I don't want everybody out there in the dark, and for safety purposes, I think it's
Okay.
better to do it when we have
Yep,
some light.
and we'll notify the neighbors as well, and it will be hunting season.
Yep. Bring your orange.
Blaze orange.
Great. Anything else?
I think that's it from our end. You guys all-
Wear your
Just
blaze
from the
orange.
board's timing-wise, whether it's October or November that we land on for the site walk, 5 PM or 4:30, because it's a little,
If it's
Further out.
November,
Fourth.
it's-
That'll be tough in November.
yeah, it's
I would
gonna be a
advocate,
boneyard.
if I
4 or
could, I would
4:30.
just advocate, let's just do it in October, regardless of where we're at in terms of the final. Then we've got light to our advantage, and if the weather goes to crap, we can still got November to
They're
fall back.
nodding their
Well,
heads,
What
that
if,
works.
what if we
Good.
take like, say, a Saturday morning before our November meeting and set that, and do it in the morning so that we have light and hopefully not snow?
I'd rather pressure them to do it in October, if that's okay, before the
I think-
meeting, if
I
that's
think-
okay, just choose
So
it.
October
Yeah.
15th is the next meeting.
I think we can get you enough information to your point, where you're concerned about, like, we're looking at the right plan, that we kind of know what we're looking at. I think from what Mike's
10:15
saying,
is fine.
We start losing people on weekends is the problem.
I get that. Those have never been successful in my mind. So we can get you will be looking at a plan that, at that point, that you're like pretty much going to see in November. So when you go out there, it's not going to be any weird changes from October to November when you see the plan on the screen.
Yep.
So that we will work hard to make sure you're looking at something in the real life plus on the piece of paper.
And you will cut through a path?
There already is paths out there.
Yeah, you're going to have to get us through the site.
With that,
You're going to have to get us some sort of path into the site.
and we have them because of the geotech that we already did, and Mike has some great paths out there to.
Very good, thank you.
so October 15th, time-wise, hour 4:35, any preference for the board?
Well, five's enough time as long as we have light.
Okay.
How long do you expect it would take for us to go out and do it? Do we need more than the hour?
I think 4:30 is just for the sake of, if we have the majority of our discussion out in the field, trekking back, I don't want you to miss your meeting.
Yeah, you know who we are, we talk, right?
We do, it's hard to know the agenda for sure at the moment for the October meeting, but potentially there could be a few things, so I would want to make sure that we're back.
Great,
in
say
time.
4:30.
All right.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to the board. Thank you all.
And yes,
Nice having someone bring this project to us who's been down the road before.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Any public, any other comments from the public? Good, thank you.
yeah.
Motion to,
Anything else?
no, just adjourn.
Is there a motion to, anything else before we seek a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. All in favor of adjourning? Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody.
See you later.
Take care. Good to see you.